In the Lost Lands is a fantasy action movie adapted from George R.R. Martin's 1982 short story. Here to tell us all about it is the man himself, George R.R. Martin. George, thank you so much for joining us.
No, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So, can you explain a little bit about what In the Lost Lands is about?
It's a epic fantasy, I guess you could call it, even a dark fantasy, because there are elements in it about that are horror, scary stuff, I hope. And it derives from, as you said, a short story that I published in 1982, when I was considerably younger than I am now.
Weren't we all?
I was writing a lot of short stories then in the early part of my career. Now, I, of course, am most famous for writing these gigantic books that take decades to do and are thousands of pages. But I began with shorter stuff, and In the Lost Lands was one of those. Original anthology called Amazons 2, and reprinted various places since as Dream Songs. And now it's coming to the big screen.
So director Paul W.S. Anderson and Milla Jovovich are a strong pairing going all the way back to Resident Evil. What did they bring to this adaptation as collaborators?
Well, of course, the visuals. I mean, I've been known to do, screenplays and movies and TV shows in recent years, but certainly not in 1982. So you have to translate words on the screen to words on the page to a look on the screen. And, Paul is an amazing director, amazing visuals, his effects. You really are plunged into another world. And Milla is a sensational as Grey Alice. So you feel the characters are coming alive.
It stars Milla Jovovich. Can you tell us about her character?
Sure. She's Grey Alice, who's the central character, a sorceress in a future world. It could be maybe post-Holocaust, maybe post some magical thing, but it's a world that's been devastated, and the cities are mostly ruined. Most people are dead, and there is an area outside of one of the kingdoms called the Lost Lands, where if you're smart, you don't go. But Grey Alice goes anywhere, and she has magical powers, and she's someone that other people come to hire her to do a spell or to get something for you. However, you do business with Grey Alice at your own risk, because she can deliver things, but sometimes there's a bite for them. So there's a saying, you can buy anything you want from Grey Alice, but you'd be smarter not to.
We also obviously worked on Elden Ring. We're big fans of Elden Ring here at IGN. We named it Game of the Year in 2022. Do you have a favorite character that you created for the game?
Not really. I mean, what they wanted was... when they came to me from Software, they wanted the world. They knew the Elden Ring, the action of Elden Ring that the players would get into would be in the, quote, present, but something had created that present, had created that world. So where did that world come from? And, I've done a lot of world building, most notably on Westeros and the backgrounds of A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. And I like doing world building. So what had happened 5,000, 10,000 years before the current day action in Elden Ring that led them to that place?
Was everything that you wrote used in the game, or is there more material that could be used in future installments?
Yeah, I think there's, especially when you're world building, there's always more that you actually see on the screen. And, that's true of any of these big epic fantasies. I mean, you look at Tolkien, and there are hundreds of pages of past history before you get to even the era of The Hobbit, and, dozens of kings and wars and things like that. And Tolkien was, of course, the great genius. So all of modern fantasy is really in his shadow. And he did that the way no previous writer had ever done it before. I mean, you got hundreds of pages of background and appendices, made it seem very real, like a real history book. If you look at some of the fantasists who came before him, even great ones, it would always begin with, once upon a time there was a kingdom, and there was the king, and he had a beautiful daughter, and then there was a prince from another land. And half the time they didn't even have names. It was like, then the king said, and that can be very effective with a whole different feel. That's the kind of the fairy tale feel, as opposed to post-Tolkien. I think it's the history book feel, the fantastic history book.
Would you be interested in coming back for a sequel to Elden Ring if you're asked?
Well, I can't say too much about it, but there is some talk about making a movie out of Elden Ring. So we'll see if that comes to pass, and what the extent of my involvement was. I don't know. I'm a few years behind with my latest book, so that also limits the amount of things that I can do. When I wrote In the Lost Lands and created Grey Alice, she was intended to be a series character. There were a lot of series fantasy going on about, Conan the Barbarian, many stories about him, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Fritz Leiber, same thing. So I created Grey Alice thinking I could write a series of stories about her. And you still could because, it's an interesting world. It's written in a short story, so it's not as detailed as some of the other worlds I created, but you could write more short stories about her, even novels, even screenplays. But we'll see. Is this movie a hit? Do they want more stories about Grey Alice? That's for something to be decided down the road. You never know.
Well, this is IGN Fan Fest. We know you were a big Fantastic Four fan growing up. Are you looking forward to the new MCU movie?
I'm interested in seeing it, certainly, because I am a Marvel fan, and Fantastic Four published some of my letters. So I'll certainly see it. I don't know. I'm a little worried. There have been, 3 previous Fantastic Four movies, or 4?
Maybe 4, yeah.
4 would be right. If you count the Roger Corman
The Roger Corman one, right.
The Fantastic Four in the comics was period. It came out in 1961. They were like the first people in space. They were before the Mercury Project or any of that stuff. And they haven't done that with the preceding movies. They've contemporized them. So, yeah, I'm still a comic book and fantasy geek, I'm afraid, deep down.
We'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for joining us, George. In the Lost Lands is in theaters March 7th. We have lots more Fan Fest to come, so don't go anywhere.